We need a new system. We need a new society. We need to demand that which may have sounded impossible even a few weeks ago, but is not only realizable, but an imperative necessity. More than 200 years after the Monroe Doctrine, the United States still seeks to dominate all of Latin America and the Caribbean. Venezuela continues to lead the way, along with Cuba, for the integration and independence of Latin America. Welcome to the Socialist Program. I'm your host, Brian Becker. Today we're talking with Jorge Arreaza. He is the Executive Secretary of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our Americas People's Trade Treaty. That's ALBA-TCP. He is the former Venezuelan Minister of Foreign Affairs. Jorge, welcome to the Socialist Program.
Thank you, Brian. I'm honored to be here in the Socialist Program and at your service.
Thank you. Jorge, you were the Foreign Minister of Venezuela in 2019. I was one of the small group of organizers who was in your embassy in Washington, D.C. At the time that the U.S. government, the Trump administration, had declared that the elected president of your country, Nicolas Maduro, was in fact not the president, that Juan Guaido was the president. The U.S. government and its allies, the U.K. and others, were seizing Venezuela's assets, including embassies, in violation of the Vienna Convention that says embassies are inviolable. We were in the embassy at the invitation of your government. We had many meetings there and so on. Eventually, we were arrested at the embassy, the last remaining people, and the U.S. government seized the Venezuelan embassy in violation of the Vienna Convention. It seemed at that time that the entire sort of Western world, so to speak, was at the throat of Venezuela. But here we are, 5 years later. Venezuela's thriving. I mean, still has lots of problems as a consequence of sanctions, but steadfastness, resilience has won the day, and Venezuela continues to thrive, not only for the people in Venezuela, but for the region. And that's your portfolio. So let's just talk about what these 5 years have meant for you, what it's meant for the region. Obviously, this is a difficult, complex, ongoing struggle. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Brian, thank you. And I was recalling those difficult days in 2019, especially when the solidarity of the American people, of this group of Americans that were in our embassy protecting the goods, protecting the building, which was from another country and had a special legal protection, but that the U.S. government was not recognizing at all. That building is still seized. It's not under Venezuelan control, but we must say that during these 5 years, we have won most of the battles. Maybe still not the war, because this war is a long one. It's been happening for at least 200 years, but we have consolidated our government, our revolution, and all these attacks, all the aggression, the worst aggression you can imagine. Even our friends from Cuba are surprised with the doses of sanctions, unilateral coercive measures, sanctions, illegal sanctions that the Venezuelan people has had to deal with and has suffered. And it's been very complex, very difficult. But in spite of all of that, I think that our people have had enough consciousness, awareness of what is happening, who is the enemy, what are the causes of this situation. And that's why today Venezuela is standing up firmly, and we are leading the processes of integration of our continent. And President Nicolas Maduro is a respected president in the world. When it was demonized 5 years ago, 6 years ago, And I don't really know what's going to happen to former President Trump, but I know that my president is in the government palace here in Caracas, taking decisions, being a president, and being the man that has control in Venezuela with his people, of course. So we have had to make several decisions, especially in the economic field, and they have been successful, most of them. It's not easy. It's 19. It's 930 illegal sanctions against Venezuela, especially against PDVSA, the oil industry, against the central bank, against the public banking here in Venezuela. We cannot import a nail for industry or the chemicals that we need to process the heavy oil. But we have find our own ways. We have allies, and we have dealt with the situation, and we have opened our own ways through, and things are happening, for the good of the Venezuelan people, and our sovereignty has been consolidated over the last 5 and 6 years, indeed.
It's very hard for people in the United States, especially those who are getting most of their information from the corporate-owned mainstream media, to really understand how economic sanctions, which are presented sometimes as an alternative to war, are in fact an insidious form of war, where you use food and medicine and water and electricity, the things that human beings need to sustain life in modern society. You deny those things to a public. So instead of the drama of bombs bursting in air, which sometimes elicit, mass protests, sanctions are kind of a silent killer. And you look at around the world, Jorge, and the United States is sanctioning like half the globe. I mean, the U.S. could say it's practicing diplomacy, but this is a kind of secret, insidious, quiet warfare that masks itself as diplomacy. And again, Venezuela has suffered so much. You see now in America, the media is like, look at all these Venezuelans coming into the United States. What about crimes committed in New York City, where I am? There was a Venezuelan migrant. Well, why are they here? Why have Venezuelans left? I mean, this other part of the question is never discussed in the U.S. media because, of course, sanctions are designed to make people buckle, to make people leave, to make people rise up. Anyway, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. There's a very good book written by Richard Nephew. He was an advisor for Obama's government about sanctions, especially or particularly against Iran. And his book is entitled The Art of Sanctions. And he's very clear. He says the aim of sanctions is to produce pain, and where it hurts the most. And that's what they have been doing against many countries, many peoples in the world, and especially against Venezuela, Cuba. But I remember a conversation I had, a meeting I had with Elliot Abrams, his famous genocidal from the U.S. And when he insisted that this was 2019, also February, and when he insisted that President Maduro had to resign and he had to leave for Cuba or some island in the Caribbean, and that we had to hand the government to Juan Guaido, and I said, you're just talking nonsense. We would never do such a thing because we have been elected by the people of Venezuela. So he said, okay, we have already imposed a lot of sanctions against you, against your oil industry. So now we're going for maximum pressure. And when I asked, what does that mean? He said, you are going to run off of electricity, of food, of medicines, of any kind of imports for your industry. So when your economy collapses, when the people cannot cannot support anymore what's happening, then it will be our task to go to Venezuela and guarantee the order that is needed. Oh, that's the Monroe Doctrine. That's the Roosevelt corollary. That's it has been happening for 200 years. But I heard what he said. I transmitted this to our government, and we got ready to resist, and in an offensive, also political offensive, economical offensive, we were able to get through these difficult times. But that's what they do with every single country. In Syria, they told a very important woman from government, the Elliot Abrams was him again, that when he began to say things that were lies, and then she said, hey, those are lies, that's not true. He said, we fabricate the truth in the US, in Washington. So you are who you are, we are who we are, and you are under our control. And you see, Syria has also prevailed. Iran is prevailing, so is Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and many other nations and countries that have been sanctioned by the US.
Speaking of Syria, just 2 days ago, the Israeli government, using U.S. weapons, bombed the Iranian embassy. I was thinking when it happened, and they killed 3 important military leaders from Iran who were in Syria. I was thinking about the Vienna Convention, and I was thinking about your embassy. The Vienna Convention says an embassy is inviolable. Even during big wars, you don't touch the other embassy because each country could destroy the other one's embassy. So it's in everyone's self-interest to make the embassy a safe space, inviolable. And yet this kind of criminal conduct, this criminal activity, and as you said, Jorge, the Venezuelan government, which is obviously the government, it's not Juan Guaido, still doesn't have control over its embassy, the building that your government purchased. It's an $18 million building in the heart of Georgetown in Washington, D.C. Again, when you think about how international law is applied, it's kind of the powerful make the laws, everybody else is subjected to the proceedings, and the powerful are immunized. They're exempted. They're not subject to their own laws. And it's sort of become normalized. Like when I read the American media, there's no utterance of outrage and disgust and the hypocrisy and double standard. Like if Venezuela sees somebody else's embassy, I'm quite sure the U.S. would consider that an act of war.
Yeah,
Outrageous, what happened in Damascus yesterday, a couple of days ago. And I think Zionism is looking for the big war and to change the game in the Middle East. It's probably not going to happen, but it would cost millions of human lives. So the U.S. exceptionalist theory has been in place for also more than 200 years, and the elite that rules in Washington believes that they are untouchable, that the rules of the game can be changed by them whenever they want. So they can facilitate any of their allies to do whatever they think it's good if they have the permission of the US. It's really dangerous because we have a multipolar world that is emerging. It's being born. And there you have China, and there you have Russia, and it's Latin American and the Caribbean also, it's Africa, it's South Asia. So there are more poles of power in the world than there were maybe in 1992 when the neoliberals pretended that this history was coming to an end. History did not come to an end. There are powerful countries, there are decent governments, there are sovereign governments in the world that are going to defend their right to exist and to advance and to develop. So I believe that the U.S., maybe it's because we're in a phase that Three Continental Institute offers a category which is hyper-imperialism, because it's at the same imperialism is declining, but at the same time it is very, very aggressive, because they don't have the productivity power they did before. China is the big power in production today. The dollar in the financial system is also thriving. It's in risk, and but they have the military power, they have communication, they have technologies, they have um, IA, so they have their own powerful tools, but not all the tools they did before. So it's a dangerous moment, because imperialism is really, it's going to be over, maybe this century. So it's going to happen, but it's very dangerous for the peoples in the world that are living this time, because it's like a wounded beast. No, it can react to in any possible way, and that's what we are looking at in the world today.
So, recognizing both danger and a possible optimism based on the fact that the world is changing. If it's the rest of the century, Jorge, we have to get through the next 76 years where this beast, a hurt, angry, dangerous beast, maybe goes away. I want to ask you about multipolarity and Venezuela's view, and you mentioned the Tricon dossier on hyper-imperialism. And the thesis of that document, one of the theses, there's many, but one of them is that unlike before World War I or World War II, where different imperial countries went to war against each other for the domination of colonies and semi-colonies, that the United States has succeeded at merging all of the other major capitalist powers under its leadership. And as a consequence, they don't even pursue their own, what should be in their own national interests. Like, I would think Germany would benefit from receiving goods from Latin America, including oil from Venezuela, or, biotechnology equipment from Cuba. It would help Germany. It wouldn't hurt Germany, but Germany and France and Italy and Spain, they more or less seem, according to this thesis of hyper-imperialism, sort of don't follow their own national interests and instead follow the international interests as the U.S. has defined those interests for the U.S. empire. Do you see it that way?
Oh, undoubtedly, that's what really happens. No, the U.S. is not. I mean, imperialism is not only the U.S. No, it's the U.S. It's all the Western nations, or the global North, however you want to name it. But the decisions are taken in Washington, not by the politicians, I believe, by the lobbies, by the corporations, and whatever they decide is the national interest for whichever country that is following the U.S. in his way to destruction. So, indeed, I don't think that in Berlin the German government takes its own decisions. I don't think that in Madrid or in Tokyo decisions are taken in a sovereign way. They are doing what the corporations and the public face of these corporations is whomever is sitting in the Oval Office in the White House tell them to do. It's really a shame, because they're not those peoples, the European people. I mean, it has no sense. Why do you have to import gas from the U.S. much more expensive when you have Russia besides you? I mean, it has no sense at all. Why do you have to be competing against China when China can really take your economies to a next level? So it's all this phase of the imperialism, this hyper imperialism, that is going to make imperialism end, but it's a dialectic process, and we still have to live some difficult phases before it actually ends. So I think that we in Latin America, especially in the countries of the ALBA, which is the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of our America, we do take our decisions in our own countries. Our governments do decide what we want to do. We do not follow all the orders from corporations or from other governments, and we have to protect this sovereignty. And that's why we are attacked continuously by Washington and by Europe and by all these countries that are following Washington's rules.
Well, let's spend a little bit of time about integration for Latin America and sovereignty and ALBA's role in it. Of course, we had the Cuban Revolution in 1959, where Cuba broke free from the empire, and people all over Latin America were so stimulated and excited about the idea that one could be free, even a small island country like Cuba. And of course, there was a socialist camp at that time, so that Cuba could sort of go somewhere else, have an alternative place other than being just crushed by the United States. So the United States then worked with the Organization of American States to create regional sort of unity under the umbrella of U.S. imperialism. And Cuba had to sort of struggle outside of the context of the OAS from which it was expelled. But the idea of the Cuban Revolution, even if it wasn't formal, even if it's not in government, it spread. The people, the oppressed, embraced it. And then you had this amazing phenomena, which was at the moment when Cuba seemed to be sort of ravaged by the breakup of the socialist camp in the 1990s during the special period, Venezuela has its own revolution. And then you have Fidel and Chavez working together as a team, as partners, and it made such a difference. I mean, that's really in many ways, the origin of this new era of integration and sovereignty and independence, or the effort to do so. Just talk about that process especially for younger people who might not be aware of how this has unfolded over the past 2 decades.
Yes, Cuba was so important for all of Latin America and the Caribbean, and even for the world, because being standing up, being there, resisting, was the only hope we had, especially after what happened in 1973 when President Allende was toppled by a coup that was organized by the U.S. Government. And it seemed that there was no hope at all for any kind of different alternative in Latin America and the Caribbean. But Cuba stood always with the peoples, and they were able to resist. Of course, they had, as you said, the support of the Soviet Union for many decades. But even when the Soviet Union disappeared, Cuba was able to overcome that situation. And then, in fact, it happened in Nicaragua first in 1979. But we had the U.S. there involved, and with an army that was armed by the U.S. And finally, they also ousted the government one way or the other. But then Venezuelan was like Allende. It was Chavez was elected in the liberal democratic framework that we had, and it was going to be much more difficult to meddle in Venezuelan issues or to topple the government. And indeed, it happened. And from the first day, Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez became not only partners, not only friends, not only allies, they were family. They felt each other as a father and a son, and they began to work on a different project for Latin America and the Caribbean and for the world. Chavez was one of the first leaders to talk about multipolarism in the world in the year 1999. And they designed this new phase of the integration of our peoples in Latin America and the Caribbean. We had the CELAC, which is the um, Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, which is the Bolivarian project. It's the project of Simon Bolivar. The Congress of Panama that happened in 1826, but it was already kind of meddled by the US and the British, and it didn't um, find the path through. But 200 years after, we have this project. It's been attacked. They have tried to destroy it, especially in the last 6 years, but it's still there. We had important integration systems in South America, like UNASUR, which was also almost disappeared. It's still there, but it's almost dead because of the right wing governments, no? That came into power after the left in some of these countries. And we have ALBA. ALBA is probably the most loyal to the Bolivarian project because it's not about economy only. It's not about commerce, trade only. It's about the peoples. It's about health. It's about education. It's about culture. It's about housing. It's about food. So it's about the people. And that's why we have to defend the ALBA. We believe that if the Latin American integration processes or union, as we really have to refer to them, if our union is a set of gears, the ALBA is the gear that is connected to the people. And it's the only of this set of gears that can listen to the people, receive the message of the people, the feelings of the people, and transmit this to the other gears, to the UNASUR, to the CARICOM, to SICA, to CELAC, and the others. And of course, all these gears in Latin America, in our America and the Caribbean, are in opposition to the OAS, no? The Organization of American States, which is the instrument of the US to impose the Monroe Doctrine. It has been this way since it was born in 1948, and it is almost dead also, I think. I think OAS is still alive because of Washington, but it's going to eventually die, and CELAC is going to eventually be the real method of union in America, and we can sit down respectfully with the US, with Canada, and talk about the issues of America, from Alaska to Argentina, from Argentina to Alaska, with respect, defending our positions, our visions, and having enough maturity as to understand that the only way to come through together is with respect to the sovereignty, the democracies, and the internal processes of the other countries.
Not so long ago, Jorge, the OAS, the Organization of American States, had a summit of the Americas in Los Angeles. And some of us helped organize a counter summit. We called it the People's Summit of the Americas. And we characterized the OAS summit as the summit of exclusion because certain countries weren't invited, like Cuba, like Venezuela, Nicaragua, not there. And what was noteworthy about it was that even though we were just a grassroots group, we didn't have big funding, we didn't have institutional support, we did have thousands of people come and condemn the OAS for exclusion, for the exclusion of those who the U.S. is targeting for regime change. It actually looked like a complete flop. It looked like a big flop, a big failure for the OAS. And a lot of us were talking at that time, hasn't the time arrived to put the final nail in the OAS coffin? Like this thing is not really relevant. It was created to isolate and demonize and caricature, or it was used that way in the 60s against Cuba, but it's turning into its opposite. And, the other thing I was thinking about, Jorge, even though it's been very tough times the last few years, when Obama came in 2009 as the president of the United States, and he decided to reopen the Cuban embassy in Washington and have the U.S. embassy in Havana after 54 years of not being open, he said the reason that he wanted to change U.S. policy is it wasn't working. It wasn't because the U.S. didn't have imperial designs. It wasn't because it had become good-hearted. It wasn't working. Meaning, whenever Hugo Chavez went anywhere in Latin America, 100,000 people would come out to greet him. And wherever George W. Bush went in Latin America, and I can remember it vividly, 100,000 people would also come out to greet him, but it was to denounce him, to condemn him. So America was becoming isolated. And I think from the point of view of your work in ALBA, the work of people in the United States, the people who believe in justice, we have to make it clear that the efforts by the governments that have so much power to impose sanctions or military threats, like Southcom has done recently, and I saw some of your statements about the head of Southcom, the Pentagon Southcom's statements. The goal here for us has to be to show that the U.S. policy is not just evil and bad. It actually just will end up isolating the United States. And I think that can happen in spite of all of the difficulties that every movement, every social movement actually encounters. Anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, I believe that the peoples of the world are aware of what's happening, and they know what the way through. They know that capitalism has made this world so unfair, with so much inequality, poverty, extreme poverty all over, hunger, and that in spite of the fact that science and technology has developed, it's not for the good of the peoples. So I believe that we have the peoples. The peoples are with us. When I say us, is any process, any project that believes that we can live in peace, that we can live with respect, that we can all eat 3 times a day, that we can sleep with a shelter, with a roof over our heads, that we can have access to education, to health, to food. I believe that capitalism is over in the souls of the people, but not in the elites that are still in place and ruling the world. So that's why we are even trying to invite, to convoke, to convey the social movements and organizations of Latin American, North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, in order to build a new social or world social alternative. We have to have a common agenda, at least a minimum common agenda of what are the minimums for us to live in peace. What are the minimums for all of us to live with health care, with education for all? So I am absolutely convinced, Brian, that if we go directly to the source of power, which is the people's, if we talk to the people, if we share with the people, I am absolutely convinced that they will come with themselves. They will come as peoples and defend the peoples of the world, and they will make the difference. So it's not only the governments of the new multipolar world. It's not only that Russia or China are very powerful, and India and Brazil here in South America. No, it's also that the peoples, that the global South is not only in the South, it's also in the North. It's there in New York, it's there in Washington. And we have to come together. We have to unite and have a minimum plan, a minimum agenda in order to change the game forever. And I believe it's we have to find the method in order to reach the goals, but those goals are the goals that the peoples want to reach. I am absolutely sure about that.
Yeah, I want to just follow up with you about the minimum agenda idea because as we look at the world, Jorge, and see multipolarity as becoming real, after 30 years of unipolar or attempted unipolar domination by the United States, it's quite clear in China, which is the strongest economy within BRICS and within what we call the global South, however one wants to characterize it. China doesn't want to be the leader of a new ideological bloc. Even though it's led by the Communist Party, it doesn't want really to assume the mantle that the Soviet Union assumed in leading a socialist bloc, which happened at the end of World War II. And whether, I'm not trying to judge one way or the other, whether it's good, bad, whatever. The point is, China is going out of its way to say, we don't want to have bloc politics. And at the same time, when you look at the dominant or the biggest countries in BRICS, they're all different politically. They're not ruled by just a certain kind of party or an ideological party. And then you think about countries from like Argentina and other major countries in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. The minimum agenda, it seems to me, Jorge, is really, in a way, in addition to social justice, it's the idea of being independent, the idea of not being dictated to. Like, it seems that's the common denominator. Countries, big countries, even countries that have reactionary governments, don't want to be dictated to by even more powerful countries. And that's an elemental thing in human beings. They just don't want to be dictated to. And it seems like this is the minimum sort of feature of our contemporary era.
Absolutely, Brian. It's sovereignty, it's independence, which is the clue of the issue here. And I believe that what is happening is that those governments, still most of them are still elites. No? Those elites don't want to be ruled. They don't want to obey Washington or the Western or however you want to name it. But then we have the peoples. The peoples, if their elite don't want to be dictated, the peoples much less. So we have to find a way for those governments to express what their people really want. Uh, Democracy is not a issue of voting for two parties every 4 years in order for one rich fellow to be the president or in the parliament or in the Congress. The democracy is having the ability to express what the majority of the people feel, want, desire, and to give the people the power to take the decisions in their own countries. And that's a way that we have to find to protect the world, humanity, to even be able to stop human extinction and the extinction of many species, because our Mother Earth is not going to take this for much longer. We've been very aggressive. The system, the capitalist system, has been very aggressive against our Mother Earth, and there's a reaction of nature. So if we want to demonstrate, to prove that we are actually part of nature, that we're actually sons and daughters of the earth, we have to find the harmony and balance point with our mother. And I am sure that the peoples of the world are the most independent or desire more independence than whatever elite or corporation. But indeed, in this phase, different countries whose governments expressing their people or their elite um, want to be independent, want to be free, is to take their own decisions, is what is part of this minimum agenda. No? Being independent is part of the first steps we have to take together, and then we have to take more steps, guarantee social rights to all of our peoples, and let the people develop humanly and be who they want to be, collect in a collective manner, in an individual manner, but you can choose what you have to do, what you want to be, how you want to do it, and you have the support of your institutions, the support of your governments, the support of the wealth of your country in order to develop as a human being.
Yeah, I'm very happy you put it that way, Jorge. Everyone wants to be independent, but there's the other agenda of social justice, which is real democracy. Like you go, I'm here in New York City. I'm in Midtown Manhattan. If I walk outside right now, I will see 20 homeless people, and it's pouring rain and it's cold. And Jorge, every 2 or 4 years, those homeless people have a right to vote. They just don't have a right to a home. They don't have a right to shelter. So the democracy in America is purely political. You have a right to vote for, as you mentioned, who will oppress you for the next 2 or 4 years, but you don't have the right to the house or to the food. You don't. These are not rights. These are not basic guaranteed rights. The right to health care. It doesn't exist. Half of the bankruptcies, 50% of the bankruptcies in the United States are from people who can't pay their doctor's bills. Like, this is the so-called richest country in the world, but not for most of the people. Half the people in the United States are living in or near poverty. That's a real statistic. That's real. So I agree with you. Social justice and independence have to be merged, and as we sort of think through this minimum program. And again, I want to go back to you, and meaning you, the royal you, Venezuelan you, the Latin American you, the Bolivarian you, because this has been part of the struggle all through Latin America for independence and social justice. And I'm thinking Bolivar and Haiti, for instance, in the struggle to end slavery. I mean, it was 220 years ago that Haiti broke free, the first slavery revolution that succeeded in human history. And yet Haiti has always been targeted, denied that which it needs to live. There are problems with Haitian elites, but the bigger problem is Western imperialism. Now we have a new crisis in Haiti, a big crisis for the people of the Caribbean, but especially Haiti. ALBA, that you are the leader, the general secretary of the ALBA-TCP, you've been talking about Haiti. There's a lot in the news in the United States. Will foreign countries intervene in Haiti? Is the solution a military solution? What are you thinking about it? What is ALBA thinking about it?
Haiti hurts. It's a kind of a debt that we have with history, because Haiti was the first free republic, and it was a black republic, and there has been a historical revenge against Haiti. They have not let Haiti develop. They have taken all of its potential. It has potential. And it had much more natural resources, and all of it has been taken, even by the so-called humanitarian aid and the Clinton Foundation and whatever they tried to do in Haiti. And for the Bolivarian Revolution and for the ALBA, Haiti is a central issue. And we are really concerned at the time because we are kind of witnessing that the same pattern is going to repeat. It's like a cycle. So now the state again is failing, and there's going to be a military intervention. Probably the United Nations will agree with it, but it's still a solution which is not directed, which is not conducted by the Haitians. The Haitians. We believe in a Haitian solution. There are many, enough, much more, plenty of Haitians that know what they want for their own people, that know where those resources of any kind of cooperation that Haiti needs have to be invested in. And they know what they have to do in order to be independent, to be happy, to develop their economy, to have food, to have housing, to have social rights. But no one listens to the peoples. So we're trying to fix, no, with this initiative, uh, kind of a government, but who is represented in those um, people, ministers, or however they're going to be called finally? Is there the real Haitians? Haitians are there. No? They know what their people want. I don't think they do. They know what the U.S. wants. They know what maybe some other countries, Canada and other countries, want from Haiti, but they don't know what their people want. So I believe that we need a Haitian solution, and we have to find the actors in Haiti that can come together, unite, and give their people their own program, their own solution, and the international community has to help that Haitian solution to happen, to be concrete and happen in reality. That's the ALBA position is to respect the sovereignty of Haiti and to respect its people and to try to look for a solution that does not involve third parties, especially um, armies, whatever army, even if it's validated by the United Nations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a torturous path. I mean, again, when the hurricane happened and so many people died, 250,000 Haitians died. I think the U.S. saw it as an opportunity. I mean, it basically liquidated the Haitian state, replaced it with U.S. financed NGOs, non-governmental organizations. But the decimation of Haiti was step by step, and of course, I think the U.S. capitalists think of Haiti and Cuba as choice real estate, the way they think of Puerto Rico right now after the hurricane, like so much dislocation. So again, we have to be able to assess this as problems between nations, but also the class question, because the U.S. policy is driven by, in the case of the Clintons, for instance, very distinctive class interests, meaning elite classes. I want to turn to Southcom, Jorge, because you have the Pentagon. They won't leave you alone. The Southcom, Laura Richardson said, she said, I'm trying to find it. She said, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua support malign activities in the region. So you guys are bad. You're malign, and the U.S. Pentagon is there to help and save the people in Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. And I liked what you said. You basically said, we reject your cynicism and arrogance, and we reject your ability to intervene in our region. But that's the other side. You have sanctions, you have diplomatic pressure, and then you have the never-ending presence of the U.S. Pentagon. Go ahead.
Yeah, Latin America and the Caribbean, we are a continent in dispute. It's been this way for 200 years. There's a letter written by Thomas Jefferson. I don't have the quote. Maybe we can find it before the program ends, where he says in 1896, or before the 30 years before the Monroe Doctrine, he says that they want to, in 1786, sorry,
Yeah.
1786, before the Monroe Doctrine and only 10 years after your independence in the US, he said that they wanted to take from Spain, one by one, the colonies they had to make them part of the United States, one by one, to rip them from the Spaniards. And they were just waiting to have more population and more military power in order to do so. And he was worried because maybe the Spaniards didn't have enough strength as to keep them together until they had enough power to take them from the Spaniards. And it actually happened. No, the Spaniards did not have enough strength. But in this sense, the military intervention of the U.S. in the Latin American history, it has been tremendous. All the coup d'etats, direct invasions, unilateral invasions, even new countries or republic created to have some kind of interest. Um, it's been because of the military power of the U.S. in this part of the world, and it was General Fowler before Richardson who attacked Venezuela as if he was, I don't know, the national security fellow from the White House, as a politician, not as a military. He went to Colombia days before you remember this humanitarian aid concert and thing they had to try to invade Venezuela from Colombia, and he was there meeting with the Colombian armed forces in order to do what? What do the military have to do with humanitarian aid and NGOs and whatever? So we believe that in this dispute, the peoples are the clue, are the key phase. And we have to understand that the Latin American and Caribbean peoples are independent, that we feel free, we feel independent. Since Simon Bolivar, Jose Marti, Morazan, O'Higgins, all of them, until now. And we're always going to be struggling with the U.S., struggling with the Western world to maintain our sovereignty, our freedom, our liberty. Richardson said it some months ago. She's concerned because Venezuela has too much oil, because Bolivia has lithium, because we have a lot of diversity, biological diversity, because we have gold, because we have whatever. They are not interested in our people. You remember Donald Trump when he said, I couldn't sleep last night because all these children in Venezuela, they are vanishing because they're so hungry and we have to do some. He slept like a baby when it came to Venezuela. He was not interested in the people, in the children. He was interested in our oil. He wants to take our industry. And he said it recently. He said, if I had been in power, we wouldn't be selling oil from buying out oil to the dictator from Venezuela. Would have taken all that oil and it would be ours. And they took Citgo, this big energy industry, which is Venezuelans, and they stole it. They robbed the U.S. government, stole Citgo from the Venezuelan state. So they're interested in having control, in domination, and to dominate our governments, our military forces. They are interested in our natural resources, but they are not interested at all in our people, in how we feel, in what we need, in our rights, in our social rights, in our democracies, in our human rights. What they want is their own wealth to grow and grow with our resources.
Yeah, I hear you. And I was thinking back again to 2019. You had, I think it was January 23rd, when Guaido says, "I'm the president." And Trump said, "Yeah, he's the president." And then the next month at the Colombian border, the attempted overthrow of the Venezuelan government. And then on April 30th of that same year, Guaido organizes a failed armed insurrection against Venezuela. And Trump and the Democrats said, "Oh, that's wonderful. That's great." And 5 years later, Trump isn't in the presidency. Whether he comes back or not, we don't know. But Nicolas Maduro, as you said earlier, is the president. The Bolivarian project continues. It offers a point of inspiration and hope. It's a tough road because in spite of Venezuela's independence, there are one obstacle after another. Same with Cuba. The U.S. says, by the way, Jorge, as you said, I'm going to let you have the last word here for the show, but I was just talking to people who said, "Oh, Cuba, it's not the blockade for Cuba. The U.S. has food and medicine humanitarian exemptions." Yes, except Cuba can't buy any medicine because no bank will do a transaction with Cuba because it's on the state sponsor of terrorism list. Cuba can't buy flour and wheat. So yeah, there's an exemption, but there's all these other means and methods to make it possible for the U.S. to try to starve Cuba, starve Venezuela. I mean, it's the most insidious thing. And at the bottom, at the end of the day, everybody should just recognize that if the people in Venezuela or Cuba were, one, not steadfast, and also not militarily organized and prepared, the Southcom and the U.S. military machine and intelligence services would succeed. So this is a hard struggle. It's a difficult struggle. It's not like walking in a bed of roses. It's not a tea party. But it's a struggle for justice. And I want to give you the last word and give you a chance, since most of our audience, not our entire audience, but a big part of our audience is here in the United States. ALBA, your organization, your message again to the American people.
Thank you, Brian, and all our respect for the American people, or the people of the United States, because you are the first victims of imperialism. You're right there in the belly of the beast, and you suffer the consequences in the front line. And even if we talk again about Haiti, if the U.S. were to send maybe less than 1% of the money and money in the way of weapons that they have sent to Ukraine to wage a war that was created by the NATO, created by the US, maybe Haiti would have enough funds as to overcome the structural crisis that it has suffered for almost a century. So what I mean is that we indeed are struggling. We'll be still defining each time there is an election in Venezuela. The U.S. I mean, I always felt it was kind of amusing when they accused Trump or Russia, Putin, of intervening, meddling in the elections of the U.S. when the U.S. intervenes in our elections, in our daily affairs every single day. Not so much in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Nicaragua, in other countries, but in most of our countries, the ambassador of the U.S. is like a minister, and he is all the time making statements against some policies of the governments or supporting someone from the opposition, or saying that this company has to be the company chosen for this kind of process. So we are aware that this battle, this war is not over. We are winning most of the battles, but at the end of the day, it's our ability to come together, to unite, which is going to make of Latin America and the Caribbean a consolidated whole of power that can stop the other poles of power and can stop, especially the US, which is in the north of our continent, and can make the US people understand that they also need a change of the game in their institutions, in their democracy, in their government, and that at some point, we, the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean, are waiting for you, the peoples of the United States, to take your own decisions, to elect real governors, people that really rule in your name, and to make your own revolution. It's not a. I'm not talking about a socialist revolution, a violent revolution. No, it's you have to find a way to express your opinion and to make your opinion become the ruling word in your country. The real democracy. We are much more, or we are sure that our democracy is much more of a democracy than what happens in the United States. Maybe there is a plutocracy in the United States. You have to have the support of all these lobbies, all these corporations. You have to have huge bank accounts in order to be a candidate with any kind of chance to become a congressman or woman or a president. In Venezuela, President Maduro was a bus driver, was from the unions of the transportation sector in Venezuela. President Chavez was a poor boy from a very humble family from Barinas, and he became a military and he became the president of Venezuela. Lula da Silva in Brazil, he was a worker and he became the president of Brazil. And most of the peoples of our America have a different notion of democracy compared to the democracies of the US or even Europe. So we are waiting for you to do what you have to do in order to democratize the whole world. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.